not be news to many of you, but for some of you it will. So, this is simply stuff I've picked up over the years. It's kind of like what I wish someone would have told me about grading, and it's some of it's received wisdom, some of it's highly idiosyncratic. It's just stuff I've cobbled together, and so you should sort of judge if it's for you or not, because that's what I do with what people tell me. With really practical issues like this. I think that what I struggled with, there's two basic problems with the beginning grader in my opinion, and one is you're afraid you're writing too much, or you feel you're writing too much. And the other one is you're afraid or you feel you're writing too little. And I've felt both of those things when faced with a paper. Oh, I have way too much to say, or I have way too little. So we'll just handle those two in that order, and then we'll go into some just miscellaneous general principles. So, first one, if you feel like you're spending too much time or effort, and a lot of graders breaking in feel this, I think this is a really freeing, exciting concept. Limit your comments. Don't ever, with one possible exception, don't ever say all of your thoughts. Don't ever be exhaustive. In gen ed classes, at the end, maximum of 4 comments, at least one positive, at least one negative. Here's the thing, they don't read them, usually. They'll go to the end, if you're fortunate, they will catch a few. They'll catch the big stuff, and they'll let the rest go. So if you try to mark every grammatical peculiarity, you'll just drown, and it won't do any good. It won't do much good. So these 4 comments at the end, or however many comments at the end, these just kind of short, should address patterns of error. If you see someone who has a particular comma problem or a particular problem with subject-verb agreement or whatever, that's the place to say it. But most important, deep structural or conceptual issues. It's more important that they learn how to think and they learn how to organize their thoughts in a logical order than it is that they know how to spell certain words. Surface errors are important, but they are on the surface. And so they do impede seeing clearly, but you want to look through a clear window, but the more important thing is the view. And so I comment much more on paragraphs than I do about individual sentences, especially, again, at the gen ed level. I like this one too. Comment in direct proportion to the effort the student expended on the piece. If you think they worked really hard, and if that shows through, then you work really hard. And if you think they didn't really work hard, then you don't have to work really hard. It's kind of it makes sense. Upper level papers for me usually get a letter or a note of multiple paragraphs at the end. Like I think if someone writes a 15-page paper for my class, they deserve a letter. They deserve something substantive. But if you write a freshman research paper the night before, in between social media platforms, and here's the thing, this is where there's really not much substantive to comment on. I like to call it the low content to word ratio. Like there's just not, there are a lot of words for little content. And so actually it's kind of easy to pick out stuff. Like you have this idea. It happened on page 3. I could tell. And then the rest of it is not really. So you can actually, some of those you can shuffle through and focus really quickly. But there's just not much weight to it. So bad or bland papers, from me, don't get a lot of comment from me because there's really not much to say. You can say some general things. However, again, people in the upper level, one of my favorite things that anyone's ever said about my writing, my grading is a young man said, I was so glad I looked at the back page first and saw my grade because from the volume of your comments, I wouldn't have known I got an A. I was like, that's a win. Because it's that guy who was going to improve, who was going to take my comments seriously, and so I really marked him up. Somebody yesterday, well, it was early this morning, while I was awake after my baby cried and I was awake, I graded an 8-page paper for a 5-page assignment. So this young man really went above and beyond, and I could tell. And so I wrote him, this was a gen ed paper, but I wrote him 3 paragraphs at the end. I broke this rule because he deserved it. He deserved that level of feedback. I have gotten the wall of red accusation. Someone said, I opened that document and I saw the wall of red. But that was for a writing sample, again, sort of professional. So marking up a paper in detail says, I believe you can handle the criticism. I think you can take it. It's not going to shake your confidence. And I've invested that much time because I think this paper is worth investing in. I think you're worth investing in. I think you will take the time to use it. All right. What if you're not in the English faculty? What if you're not trained to say things on papers? What if you just read something and you're like, well, those are words, but I don't have much to say about them. So these are some things you could say. You could talk about the writing form. So you can evaluate, does this paper have a thesis? Does it have a unifying idea? And actually this is, in classes that aren't full of English majors, I see this, they struggle with having even a unifying idea to hang their paper together. So like what pulls this paper together? Organization, can you move seamlessly from paragraph to paragraph, or do you feel like you fell in a hole in between paragraphs and now you're onto something different? Do they give appropriate levels of evidence? And do they analyze them appropriately? And actually one of the elementary problems that students have is that they'll provide evidence, they'll give you a long block quotation, but they don't analyze it. They might even just stop the paragraph there. So do they use analysis to show what the evidence actually means? All of those things are in evidence all the time. Writing style. So form is like the form of their argument. The writing style, grammar shows up here, sure, but okay. I wanted to be a creative writer. I didn't want to be an academic. I didn't lie awake at night as a teenager thinking, what if I could write articles for the Journal of English and Germanic Philology? Like that wasn't my dream. But I like to write nice sentences. And I think it's possible to write really nice academic sentences. And I think these are the 2 principles here. Sentence variety, length and structure. You can have long sentences and short sentences. You can have sentences that have the main clause at the beginning and at the end. You can have just all sorts of variations of sentence structure. Provide a very pleasing style. And similarly, precise and flavorful vocabulary. It takes work to get the right word. And if a student gets the right word, then mark, the student gets the right word. So all of those things are you can talk about them positively, negatively, depending on what's working. I will say this was, again, a high point of my academic career when my dissertation committee, this was the defense, and one of my committee members talked about distinctly Schrockian syntax. Apparently, I use sentences in a very distinctive way. I was like, okay, I'll take that. And then you can also talk about the content, whether they got their facts right. Sometimes they don't. You can, and this is where your expertise, whatever it is, you can sort of draw. And I like to think of it as simulating a dialogue in the margin. So you actually talk back to them. They have these ideas and you can say, look, this idea reminds me of this. You might paraphrase, are you saying this? I think you're saying this. You might add some implications. Well, if you really believe that or think that, or if this is true, then this is also true. So it becomes almost a classroom. You can talk to them about their ideas. Here at Lee, we're attentive to the whole person. And so just really depending on your discipline and depending on the assignment, you can have a paper that has implications for a student's psychological, mental, spiritual formation. And so if you are sort of in that mode, in particular if it's a reflective paper of some kind, you would mark this up attentive to how your words would help to shape the way someone thinks about their identity. And I grade one of these. I grade for English and Christian Perspective, I grade the capstone memoir, and which is about their life here. And so usually my comments go in two different directions. This is how your writing was, and this is my response to the content. And I have given C's to papers that moved me. I'll be like, this is not a judgment on your life. I'm not giving your life a C. In fact, I'm moved. I really think this, whatever. And I've also given A's to papers that offended me. There's one in particular, I won't go into details for obvious reasons, but this one student wrote a paper in which she narrated a conversation between her and her roommates, and it was clear that she judged each of those three rather than entering into comparison. It was just really, just seemed like an obnoxious, proud thing to do. And so I gave it an A, and then I actually wrote some stern comments about love people. I don't know what I said, but you could do that. That's kind of easy to comment on. Students might want you to justify the grade. You don't need to justify the grade to them, but you do need to clarify it. And if there's some sense that you need to explain to them, not defensively, but just clearly, this is why you got the grade you got. This one, every once in a while, this issue comes up. For some people really like rubrics. They really like these charts that will lay out what an A paper looks like, what a B paper, C paper, D paper, and then maybe there's a list of several categories and maybe a list of several subpoints in those categories, and you just sort of look at that and you might hand this rubric to the student and you just underline subpoints, and that'll tell them why they got the grade they got. Some people like it, some people don't. And there are lots of them available online. Just if you need to know that they exist, and you can tweak them and make your own. I used to use them. I used them really for the first little while, and then I just got really impatient with having to use the form all of the time. But by then I had internalized the language that was on the form. So I was able just to say, I was able to use the words precisely and explain why someone might have this, but I didn't have it actually on a chart. So I needed it for the first year or so, and then I stopped needing it anymore. So particularly if there's not much to say, if you need language for how to talk about someone's paper, you might try a rubric. You might try using a rubric, at least for a little while, and start getting some language, and then decide whether or not you want to keep going. Yeah.
So if you're not giving them a rubric, how do they know what you're looking for? Because that's kind of like their assignment exactly. Not just what we're grading by, but what they're looking for.
Sure. I think I talk about this. Maybe this is where I talk about it. I will typically say, at the beginning of a kind of like a grading cycle in a class, I will say, I look for these 4 things. I look for thesis, I look for organization, I look for thesis and fulfillment of the assignment. Did you do the assignment, and did you have like a unifying principle? Is your paper organized? Does your paper have evidence and handle evidence correctly? And does your paper use English in a competent and compelling manner? So these are those 4 categories: thesis, organization, evidence, and prose. And so I have the language that complicates that, but I will tell them those are the 4 categories that I'll use. And I really do. And usually by this time, I've been grading for a while. Usually when I get to the end of a paper, I know what grade I want to give it. That's kind of, I know what grade I should give it. Sometimes I want to give it grade I shouldn't. But if I don't, I will actually mathematically average, I will grade each of those 4 categories, and I'll mathematically average which one. Yeah, that's a question.
I teach in the nursing department.
Mm-hmm.
It's a little bit different.
Mm-hmm.
But, I don't always give a rubric, but I will give an outline,
Mm-hmm.
and then you'll need to have all the content in the outline.
Yeah. Definitely, if you use a rubric, use it. If you use an outline, announce it. If you use 4 categories, announce them. Definitely orient them not just to the assignment, but to the subjective patterns of grading that you're going to use, for sure. Yeah, in fact, okay, I'm searching for this point. We'll get to this in a minute. It's under general principles. This one was kind of a breakthrough for me in year 4 here. I realized, and it's how they would write better if they thought I wanted to read their work. And I would like my job better if I wanted to read their work. And so and this is the second subpoint, I just started assigning writing projects I wanted to grade. I wanted to hear their opinions on some issue, so I would assign a writing assignment about it. And sometimes they weren't as interested in the issue as I was, but at least they knew that I cared, and I wanted to draw them in. And I started announcing this to students, and I would say, I'm really looking forward to receiving your paper on this, and your paper is lying down in a stack on my desk, and I'm looking forward to getting to it. And boy, you just sort of see them emotionally kind of adjust to that, and they kind of like it. Imagine thinking of a paper as feeding someone's appetite, rather than like turning their stomach. Yeah, they want to bring us delight, not be our crosses. And I've had these really interesting conversations where students will hand me a paper and apologize because they might even say, I did my best work, I know you were looking forward to this, and I'm just not sure you'll enjoy it. And I was like, well, I'd rather have that than some other problems. And I think especially at Lee, with as relational as this campus is, if the paper can actually be a relational transaction and not just an academic one, it goes far. I also like to tell them how serious I am about their writing. I will say to freshmen and seniors, I probably care more about your writing than you do. We should know that. But if you are serious, then you should say that. If you're not, then don't lie to them. That would be bad. Have an A mean something. Be easy to impress, but difficult to satisfy. And we'll get to this more in a little bit, but they want to, like I said, they want to bring delight. They want to excite, interest you. Excite might be even pitching it strong. They want to interest you. They want you, but if you're too easily satisfied, then it will just not invite them to develop cognitively and in so many other ways. So some students are going to be disappointed. Some students are not going to, if you do this, some students are not going to be happy with the grade they receive. But for the people who reach a standard of excellence, it will be deeply meaningful. And I've seen it change a lot. And I remember it was a really lovely moment in one of the lounges where a student had taken several of my classes, and I handed a paper back to her. I think I'd graded it, and it wasn't in class, but I just saw it. I was like, here, I've got this paper for you, handed it back, and it was an A. And she just lit up. That's the first A I've gotten in one of your classes. And you just, like, it mattered. And I mark A papers up more than the other. So this is where even my A papers, that's actually really where I start getting interested, because I think there's something there we can really work with and go further. This is what I wanted to say in terms of the other way. Clearly communicate your typical grading scale early so that they're not unpleasantly surprised. So any information you give, sure, give them the rubric for sure. And this is sort of the moment of pain where it surprises everybody. I'll just say, I start with a B. If you do everything that I ask you to do on the assignment, competently, good college student, you get a B. If you move from competence to excellence, you get an A. If you get below a B, that means there's something wrong. Not just you need some adjustment. And that one I always like to tell them. My son went to ELC, and they had color codes for your behavior. Like they come home and there's that. So there's perfect purple, which is kind of like an A. But they all start the day on rad red. And so rad red is about like a B. Like you solid day, nothing real interesting or compelling one way or the other. You did your job. But the one below rad red is you need to listen yellow. And that's what I'll say. Like if you get below a B, you need to listen. There's something that we need to talk about. It's not offensive. It's just we need to work our way up. Write something yourself in your field and try to get it published. That will change the way you teach writing in a whole bunch of different ways. It will keep you updated in how the writing process feels so that you know what your students are struggling with. It will make you more patient with them as they flounder because you've just floundered in certain aspects of the research or writing process. It will also make you less patient with them because you stuck with it and they didn't, or maybe they did, but you are able to hold them to a much more educated standard because you've inhabited that. It will help you understand what it's like to receive harsh criticism and revision suggestions because that's what professional reviewers do. And they can be pretty blunt and forthright. And so you need to you will be able to just rhetorically sensitive, be more rhetorically sensitive about criticism because you know how certain words feel, how certain terms feel, what's the way that you want to receive good or bad news. And it will keep you understanding the personal and professional value of writing in your discipline. So you'll know why it's important because you are doing it and keep doing it. You'll be able to teach writing as if it means something because you've just been refreshed that it does to you. I always try to have a writing project in the summer for many reasons, but one of them is I teach senior thesis in the fall, and I want stories to come from my summer research, to go into senior thesis in the fall and tell these people who are trying to write 25 to 35 page essays that this is what I did over the summer, these are the struggles I had, this is really fresh for me, this is how I worked through the writing process. I put together, I love doing this, I put together little packets of rejection letters and acceptance letters that I have received, and I will hand it out to them as a handout, and we'll talk over, like, this is what it means to be, this is what it feels like to be shot down. This is what it feels like to have someone say, probably good enough, This is what it feels like to have an enthusiastic rejection. Someone said about one of my grad school essays that just the ideas didn't fly, but the writing, the prose shimmered. And I sent it to my dissertation director and I said, you never tell me my prose shimmers. And he never responded to that email. And then the acceptance, so you just talk through all the ranges of response that happened at the professional level. And more on that in a moment. Just yesterday, I had a student, she was getting ready to turn in her this is actually kind of a theme this semester. I have a few overachievers in my Western Lit class. There's a 5-page assignment, and they keep turning in 8 to 10 pages. So this young woman has an 8-page paper she's working on. She's going to turn it in. She said, "I've been working on it for a long time. I had it written a month ago, and I have just sort of come back to it and revised it, and I revised it a bunch last night." And she's a wonderful student, obviously. This is very unusual. But she was trying to make it perfect. And I told her, just turn it in. You can't make it perfect. And in fact, it's good for you to learn from other people about your writing. Like, you get it to a certain stage that you've done what you know to do, and you give it to someone else, and they'll tell you. This is how you learn and how you grow. And then I gestured toward this. When I send off my stuff, people will respond back to me and they'll say, "This could be better," or "Have you thought about this issue?" or "Have you?" And so they'll invite me. So I'm at the highest professional levels. There's always still this cycle of revision and voices coming in from outside. More about this later, but inviting them further into the field of writing. Find outlets for student writing, oral or written publication, and have that ready at the end of the paper, or email them later. They want meaningful work. Some of them do. Some of them don't want work, but the ones who are in it want meaningful work. So oral publication can be as simple as, sometimes in freshman comp, I'll put up the best sentences of each person's research paper. I'll go through and I'll pick out a sentence from everyone. And we'll have a day called Celebrate the Sentence. And I'll just say, look, and it's a kind of publication. It's like, look, what you did is worthy of sharing to this group. It's not just about you and me. It's not just about your growth and your process. It's about you did something good right now. We can talk about it. Some days, research paper turn-in day, I'll just go around the room and what did you write your research paper on? So that it's anything that kind of breaks out of this, it's just you and me this deserves a wider audience. This becomes a part of a community. And then the farther up you get, just be aware of conferences the students can go to, or conferences you can take them to. And next weekend I'm taking 2 students to a professional conference on Christianity and literature just down the road at Covenant. So I picked out somebody's paper, and I thought, I told him, you should submit this you could submit this if you wanted to. And we do that a fair bit in the English department. Of course, there's a lot of writing. But it was really powerful in grad school when that clicked for me. And it was particularly when it was in my Faulkner class, William Faulkner class. The teacher said, you could take this to a conference. And all of a sudden I realized, hey, writing matters. And the earlier that happens, the better. Identify clearly what's interesting and exciting about a given paper. There was a student years ago who talked about certain professors in our department who, when you told them your idea, they would get excited, visibly excited. She said they would just light up, and that meant a lot. Frequently, students will have an idea, but they don't know why it matters in the wider context of the discipline, and that's something that you can kind of provide. I struggled with this a lot, actually, even in grad school. I would have this idea, and I wouldn't know what it meant. So I'd go to my professor, I'd say, why is this important? And he would say, go check out 17th century prose, and I would go do that, and it was cool. So sometimes students have a lot of ideas, and they don't know which one's interesting or important, so they deliver them all to you, and it's your job to sort them and say, okay, this thing, everybody knows it. This thing, everybody knows it. This thing, I think you could really do something with. Related to that, distinguish potential from mastery and even competence. Sometimes you have these wonderful masters of writing. That's great. Sometimes you have writers that are competent, and that is also great in its way. Sometimes you have students who just have potential. Show them where they have potential. This could be a complete structural disaster, but these ideas, I mean, you're really doing a good job thinking about these ideas. And again, I just out of last night, someone, organizational disaster, did great research. And so there's really something to build on. The lower levels of writing, well, I would even argue, all of undergraduate writing is not about competence or mastery. Nobody's writing at any kind of really professional level. It's all about potential, and it takes a discerning eye to look past so-and-so, can't use a comma, to there's some real thinking here. One of the most wonderful students we've graduated from the English department since I've been here has a major issue still. I get emails with this, with the word "it's," when to put the apostrophe in and when it doesn't. And she's in grad school in English, and she's doing wonderfully. And it bothers me every time, but she hasn't achieved complete mastery yet. So in Jean's lead-in, I really do care about this. I teach at all of these levels. Cultivate a sense of what's appropriate to expect from freshmen, sophomores, juniors, seniors, and in different courses. So you can't bring out the senior hammer, obviously, to grade a freshman paper, but what's the freshman hammer? Like what things can you expect? And often this relates to what kind of writing help have you been giving? So have you set up a good research process in class? Well, if you haven't, and if they struggle with research, it's not fair to grade them really stringently if you haven't covered it in depth. And so I'm always kind of adjusting this. Okay, well, I'm reading this paper, this person is struggling with problem X. Have I talked about it? And if so, then there's on the clock accountable, and if not, they're not. At least not to a particular degree. I just told someone yesterday, this paper is written for a sophomore level class. It is at a higher level. I imagine that was fun to hear. But I've kind of calibrated that over years. I know what a sophomore level paper is like, more or less. I know what to expect. And this was not that. This was something better. So grading is not one size fits all. It's not one size fits all in any class. It's not one size fits all in any course. You just sort of, you're constantly calibrating your expectations. And then last, use your best critical acumen to locate the upper level papers within the disciplinary conversation and your best writing skill to convey it. So if you've gone to graduate school, I mean, we're professionals here. We've done this at a high level. Our students, particularly the ones who are engaged and want to learn, deserve our best professional critiques, our best professional mind when we're writing something up. The power of a phrase, a sentence or two, that sums up a student's paper or growth over the course of several years. If you are a good writer, use your best writing, basically, to comment. And so I can, I remember that forward sentence on my undergrad senior creative writing fiction story, where the woman wrote, "Your prose is beautiful, period." 4 words, I'll never forget them. I remember my dissertation director, where I was trying to sell him on a paper idea, and he said, "This is smart, period. Work it out, period." I was like, I won. It was like, that was a big moment. So like, it doesn't take, you don't have to write a whole bunch. If you get it right, if you have thought about this paper and you were able to say, this is what's happening, It can be very, very powerful, and I've seen that over and over again. I feel a little bit defensive, not defensive, a little sheepish about what I'm about to say. I do save all of my upper level classes, send me their paper online, and I save them. And I do this for a number of reasons. One of them is if they want me to write a recommendation letter for them, I can go back and see. I don't have to read their whole paper to see how they did. I can just read my comments at the end, which are sometimes better written than the paper. You know, like if I got it right, this is what they do. So I know some of the things I've said, and I remember writing this comment. It was my first year here. I took some pains over it. I wanted to get it right, because I knew there was a big word in it. I told someone, the complexity and variation of your sentence structure borders on the professional. And I used the word professional, as does the argumentative clarity and progression of your topic sentences. And I knew the big word was professional, and I remember sort of hesitating to use it. I was like, should I? I graded it right after lunch. I was in a great mood. It's like, this is wonderful. This is a wonderful paper. You know, it's like everything is wonderful. The clouds are wonderful. This is a really big word. Should I use it? Yeah, sure. Put it in there. That changed everything. And she's still kind of talking, that word she has said later has haunted her. And she's come back, it's like, it really mattered, it really mattered. And then kind of on a lighter one, this again was pretty early. It must have been right after lunch, this one too. I was in a really good mood. And I ended with a rock on. It's good paper, rock on. And I got that back in a course evaluation. I know who that was from. So this language kind of circulates, and I should tell you story after story of if you can sum up in a sentence something about a student, some attribute, some accomplishment. If you can say this specific thing you got right, it really matters. And then really the sentence I use, doesn't have to be long. Sentence I use, I break this out once or twice a semester for really good freshmen. I'll just say, you're good at this. And I'll just drop that, walk away, and then eventually they'll come around the office and start asking about the major because it's sunk in. So, all right, that's what I have. Questions, comments about any of this stuff?
That you can actually look at the writing for and help them without it being busy work?
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, it obviously varies from major to major, but nursing, yeah. I would imagine there's a lot of research that can be done. And very specific, having them investigate some kind of problem. And that's really kind of the basis of every writing assignment. Have them investigate some kind of problem, see what's out there, come to a solution about it. Having them investigate a problem that they care about. And it could be medical, it could be for nursing, it could be probably even emotional or psychological, how to handle patient care. But some problem or tension that they feel the need to resolve would be the way I would pitch that. And the example I love to use about this one is every paper, I'll talk about this with introductions, but every paper ought to work like Beethoven's mom called him for dinner. And so I heard this on a I think this is true. I'm pretty sure this is true, but I'm not a musician. This is sort of like this urban legend. I don't know. I think this is true. Beethoven's mom, Beethoven would be upstairs, I don't know, like playing with his Tinker Toys or whatever. And his mom would go to the piano, and she would play what's called an unresolved chord. And I kind of don't even know what that is, but I think there are like 3 notes, and you play the first 2 and just kind of let it there. So Beethoven is just little Beethoven, just up there, just steam coming out of his ears, because he has to resolve that chord. So he comes downstairs, and his mom pounces and like into the spaghetti. But that's what paper topics do. They provide a compelling tension that the paper is written to alleviate. And that's what the introduction does, is it spells that out. All right, thanks. This is fun. This is fun.